Hello, this is Darren Pulsipher, Chief Solution Architect of Public Sector at Intel, and welcome to Embracing Digital Transformation, where we investigate effective change leveraging people, process, and technology. On today's episode, Natural Language Data Analytics with special guest Steve Wasick, CEO and founder of InfoSentience. Steve, welcome to the show.
Darren, thanks so much for having me.
Hey, we had a fascinating conversation. When was it? 3 or 4 weeks ago. You showed me some of the tech you guys are doing. Very fascinating stuff. I got to hear a little bit about your background. I think it's an interesting, fascinating background. Why don't you tell our audience a little bit where you came from and why you're doing what you're doing?
Yeah, so I'm a tech founder and generally I think to have taken the technical lead within my company. But I have sort of a weird background for that because I started out, I was an English major. I was actually at the University of Hawaii and I was trying to be a screenwriter and was in Hollywood for a few years. And then I ended up going to law school and was in law school at Northwestern in Chicago. And in my third year, I had this sort of completely random idea for fantasy sports, for a product for fantasy sports that just became sort of my overwhelming passion. And so I worked on this app basically when I was finishing up law school. And after I graduated, I raised some money and started this company and ended up having to sort of, in some ways, learn how to be a programmer. I took programming in high school and really liked it and kind of kept up on it. But I certainly wasn't any good. And so definitely was a bit of a rough road to do that. But I think that, and we'll talk more about my company later, but I think that the space that I was in terms of, innovating was new enough that there wasn't really any benefit to kind of having a technical background, at least within the innovation space, because it was all brand new. And in some ways having an English background and having a legal background, which is a lot about logical rules and relationships and things like that, I think really helped me out. So yeah, that's kind of a different path, I think, for a technical founder at least. But I don't know, I'm still here, so it wasn't that bad.
Well, you're every computer scientist's worst nightmare. I'll just tell you that right up front. I'm a software engineer.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, and you guys drive us crazy because you got all these crazy ideas and you could figure out how to do it. And those computer scientists are like going, no, you can't do that. But you do it, right?
Yeah.
And then you drag people along and they go, all right, we can fix this up. I love when people do cross-domain type stuff because you bring new ideas. You have that diversity that brings it into the field. And when I saw your stuff, I could tell there was a different mind behind it, right? Meaning it was more, and we'll get to that later, but it was more user-friendly, which is a big problem for a lot of technical people. They don't do things user-friendly. It says, well, you got to learn how to use the tool.
Yeah.
No. Yeah.
I think it was a bit difficult for my first employee who was trained, in computer science, because I had ideas and looking back on them, a lot of times they really were the correct idea, right? Like they were coming from this place of having struggled within the field that I was working with, which is natural language generation, and kind of understanding where the wrong turns were. And so I was like, hey, we got to do it this way. But it was also, that package was also coming along with like, I don't know what a dictionary is, so I'm just using arrays and some sort of weird, so it's like hard for him to be like, how could this possibly be the right solution? Because the syntax is so stupid, it's almost like you get this challenge if somebody's like talking in a second language, and it's like they can be brilliant, but they're having trouble with, it's hard to figure out, with the actual communication. So it's kind of like that. So I think that was some struggles for us when we were starting off, of him just kind of being like, I don't think this is right, and so that was definitely something we worked through.
I told you, you're a software engineer's worst nightmare because you push us outside of our boundaries.
Yeah.
And we all get stuck in our boxes. And I love how you pushed outside of the box on this. When you showed me the product, I was like, oh, that's pretty clever.
Thank you.
That's really clever, pushing way beyond what us computer scientists think about. So let's talk about the problem space. First off, you said fantasy sports specifically. If you're in Chicago, it's got to be baseball.
It was actually
Or was it
football. Sorry, it,
oh, it was
it was
football.
actually
Okay, all right.
football. Yeah, because I was just in a fantasy sports league in law school, and I was really busy, and I was just kind of like, man, I don't even know what's going on with my own team, let alone like what's going on in the league. And I was like, boy, it'd be really cool if there was a way to kind of like provide coverage, like unique, interesting information about my league, just like you follow real sports, like where you have
Right.
pictures and headlines and here's the top stories and what's going on and insight and bringing in like the really cool context of like, wow, like this team got blown out by 30 points in the playoffs, last year, and now they blew them out by even more, in this game, and it's a big revenge game or something like that. That's what makes sports actually interesting, right? Is all the context and the stories behind the stats, not just necessarily the game itself. I mean, you know this from watching. If you're watching a sports game where you don't know the teams and you have no rooting interest or any context, it's usually pretty boring, unless you're just an absolute fanatic for a sport. If you just drop in, to a game, it's not that interesting. So that was my idea, and I started working on it while I was still in school. And as I started solving a lot of the challenges that came along with actually getting really good content, because I started off just kind of doing like a Mad Lib and like, oh, okay, here's who won and here's who lost. Then I was like, oh, let's try to add some more interesting pieces. It was really a challenge to start thinking like, oh, you have to deal with sort of repetition. We could talk about maybe more of that later, but like, there's a lot of difficulties in creating a really in-depth, long piece of text that's completely fluid in terms of like what it can cover and how it can fit together and everything else. And as I started solving those challenges, I started realizing, hey, actually, this is more than just like a fantasy sports thing. This is a general sort of analytical engine and synthesis engine. And so that started me on the path of being like, oh, okay, I actually want to start a company around this because I was really compelled by the idea.
Let me reiterate what I think I heard you say. You took a lot of statistics and lots of information about the league, about your team
Hmm.
first, and you wrote it in something that you could easily read,
Yeah.
right? Instead of looking at graphs and think, because a lot people, even though we think we get a lot of context from pictures, we get some context from pictures. It's the written word or someone speaking to you where you really hear the emotion, you hear all the things involved in it. So that's what you did, was you wrote something that was easy to read, not
Hmm.
normal computer generated
Yeah.
stuff like numbers and
Yeah.
player with number. No one's going to read that, right? That just so I
Yeah.
thought that was pretty ingenious.
Yeah, I think to your point about even graphs, charts, you still have to tell the story in your head, right? Like you have to see a
Yeah.
line and it's going down, and then there's something in your head that has to say that's going down, right? Like you have to translate that, right? And that's the beauty of a story is that you don't, right? Like if when we talk about good writing, we're really talking about something that allows us to understand the information as opposed to analyze the information. When you're reading something that's really well written, it's just like it's giving you everything you need to actually think about what's happening, right? And not have to come up with what's happening. And even charts and graphs, and certainly if you have like a row of numbers in a
Yeah,
table
that
or
doesn't mean
something,
anything. Yeah.
you got to do the whole thing. Okay, what's going on here? How does that fit into what's happened in the past or what's happening? I'm looking at the West Coast information. How does this fit into like the East Coast or our overseas stuff or whatever it is that you're looking at? If it's just numbers, you got to tell the whole story and then you have to think about it, right? Whereas if it's written, you could just say, here's everything you need to know. And then you as a decision maker can then, run with that.
So that's really interesting. I love how you said well written provides the whole story and color all in one. When you said that, I thought of some poetry that needs a lot of an analysis that we had to do in high school and
Yeah,
college.
yeah,
Don't get me down that road. That'd be kind of funny though. Could you imagine if your analysis spit out haikus?
yeah. We could do that. Hey, we're for hire. So if somebody wants their business intelligence in haiku format, we'll give it a shot.
Or iambic pentameter, right?
Yeah,
All the sonnets that
that'd be tricky, but yeah,
Shakespeare
we could
wrote.
try it.
That'd be pretty funny. So, all right. So the written word in conjunction with graphs, because you guys have
Oh yeah.
graphs too in your stuff. So you're doing the analysis.
Yes.
Okay, so we all know AI needs a lot of data in order to understand other data, right?
Hmm.
So how are you training your analytics engine? And all right, you've done it for sports. Is it a general analytics engine that I can run against anything now? And then how do I have context? All that stuff. So
Yeah, that's a good two-part question because they both relate to each other. So we don't really train it in the sense that it's not like an LLM. It's not probabilistic. We model it.
okay, so it's not a large language model like
No, no, no.
like ChatGPT or Bard or any of those. This is a different AI.
Yes.
Um,
Yes, we use what we call conceptual automata, which is all about breaking apart an event or story or interesting fact into its constituent parts. So I'll use an example from sports to start. Like if you say, "All right, we know what a team is, right? You have this idea of what a team is, and you can add all
okay.
these sort of characteristics to it." And we can say that it's sort of similar to an organization or it's made up of players. You can look at all these, the subcomponents, everything else. But then you can also have an idea of a team winning a game and what that means, right? And it might mean different things for different sports, right? But you can just have a general concept of a team winning a game. And then you can also have a general concept of a streak, right? Which is just a series of events that happen over time, right?
Okay.
And then if you put those all together, you can have this idea of a team on a winning streak, right? So you put them all together, and now in our system, when all those things come together, everything else in the system can relate to it because it understands its subcomponents, right? So it understands all the things that it's made of. Because as you get more and more complicated, you can't have like a bunch of if-then statements or templates or anything else that's going to
Well,
fall
yeah, of
apart
course.
instantly. So you have to be able to have the intelligence embedded on these subcomponents and give it the intelligence to be able to combine with other things. So even you could say like, all right, they were on a winning streak and then they lost this game. Well, that's a broken winning streak, right? So it's like, and then that can fit into a narrative, but you can't say that, right? You can't say, hey, they, were on a winning, they were on a winning streak, then they lost. Talk about that game, and then say, hey, they actually won last game, and that was the third straight game that they'd won, right? Even though those are two different things. Hey, they won three straight games, and that they, as of last week, right? Or they broke a winning streak of three games this week, right? Like those are two separate stories in the system if you were to build them out individually. And that's just a small example, but there's things like that where it's like you have subcomponents of stories, you have stories that are very clearly related to each other or even in opposition of each other, such that like if this sentence follows something that's negative, right, and now it's positive, you might have to have a little transition like that said, they are, doing great in this other stat or something else like that. Or, that said, they do have their leading scorer coming back, so that might change it, right? Like everything relates to each other. And human beings, this is, our superpower is being able to just have all these conceptual
Yeah, to understand the relationships
everything,
between
right? We
social
just
constructs.
slot it
Yeah.
right in, right? But that's something that traditionally computers have struggled with. And so our system, can now handle that in ways that allows like really in-depth, complicated narratives to come together in ways that are not templated. We are not like a Mad Libs company, like we are an AI company. And the good news is that, that makes it really flexible and powerful. The bad news is we can't just apply it to everything right out of the box. Okay. Like if you're talking about sports or you're talking about the stock market, it's like our system definitely does both. Like we have a stock product, commodity product, marketing stuff, healthcare stuff. We're in all the verticals basically. And we can't just sort of jump into a brand new data set, a brand new analytical question essentially and have it ready to go. However, there's a good chance that you care about things like something being on a streak or something being on a trend or something, moving a big, amount
So
this way and then the other way. Those
there,
concepts are already in there.
yeah, gotcha. So the concepts translate, but the context is
Yes.
different
A
for the
little bit
different
different.
verticals.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that's where you have professional services come in to your company, um, and help. establish the context for the data that you're working on? How does that work?
Typically we just work with our clients, right? And
Okay.
usually,
Okay.
a lot of times when we're working with somebody, there already is writing on the topic, right? Like sometimes they're doing manual
Of
reports.
course.
And so you can just look to see like, okay, what do they care about? What is the jargon that they use? What are the types of things that they talk about together, or that tend to step on each other. All these different things you can get a pretty good sense. Or something like sports, where I'm a sports fan. Some of my employees are, so we already know that. Same thing with stocks. Like we have a pretty good idea with that. But there are some use cases for sure where we just need to talk to the client and just basically interview them about what is it that you care about. Do you have any examples? And then we take that and then use that to create the content.
Okay, so there is some. This is really when I heard you talking, I said, "Wait, AI is a lot of English majors. I have a lot of friends that teach at university in English. AI is kind of scaring them a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Because right,
Yeah.
and even writers are having a hard time, and the strike in Hollywood with, and I mean that's dear to your heart a little bit, right? Because
Yeah. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
work on that. But what I heard you said was your understanding of the English language and your training as a lawyer helps you understand language really well, and how we understand language, and that's the foundation of what you've developed here is how concepts relate to each other in language. I think it's brilliant, right? Because you found a new branch of where um, English majors and writers can go, and that is to help AIs become even more cognizant of the way that we think,
Hmm.
which I think is brilliant. Another question around this: how flexible is um, the tool that I can tune it myself, or do I need you guys to help me tune it for my special case? Because I can tell you from my experience talking to customers, they all think they're special. They all think that no one's ever done anything like we're doing. Okay, 80% of it is the same, but that 20% or maybe even 5%, they want something special. So, how easy is it for me in my company to do I need to sit down with one of your guys to really configure the model or configure the AI to do what I want to do?
Yeah, we don't have an enterprise version, so you definitely have to talk to us. And I
Okay.
will, if you're out there, I will definitely make you feel special, because I would say all of our clients really are their own unique unicorns when it comes to their data. Like no matter what, like even if it's a similar data type of thing that we've had in the past, there's always quirks. And I think that this is actually one of the fundamental problems of data analysis that's out there right now, is that it's really hard to have a sort of one size fits all structure for any data, because once you do that, then you kind of cut off a lot of the unique parts of like
Oh, okay.
because it's like, let's say you have a company. I actually literally was just talking to somebody last week about this exact issue, where they have a bunch of different manufacturing plants, right? And they have a bunch of different sort of data structures in their manufacturing plants, right? Where it's like, oh, sometimes they refer to it as an error, and other people, they have it sort of broken down. And other times it's like, well, is this really an error? It's like it had to go back on the line, but then it got fixed. So that's kind of a somewhat, it's like, there's all these different things. And it's like, if you're trying to say, okay, let's just synthesize, let's just have a standard data set. Well, now all these manufacturing plants, which are all a little bit different and doing different things, they all have to put their information into this standardized set, which is difficult enough in one moment. But then they're constantly going to be changing and adding things and switching things out. And now they're either going to just not be able to add that data, right? Or they're going to, they're going to try to wedge it in or something. It's like you need a system that understands that things are flexible, right? And so that's what kind of our
Okay.
system does, and that's why we have to sort of do it on our own a little bit, is because it takes a lot of training essentially to understand how to like pull out the commonalities, how to put things into an ontology essentially, and then also how to get that into our system so that it can do the analysis. So it's a
So you
yeah.
guys actually embrace the variability in the data.
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Yes.
then you can normalize that with context, which I think is
Yes.
which is really difficult to
Hmm.
do, right? And I love the story of the manufacturer because you're right. As long as there's humans involved, and not just humans, but also machines that come from different vendors, the
Hmm.
data is going to be different.
It's going to be
What
different.
is an error in one manufacturing plant is very different than in another manufacturing plant.
But at the same time, if you're running all the manufacturing plants, you want to be able to have a report that maybe
Well,
tells you,
yeah,
like, yeah, errors are up, right? But like, what does that mean? You might be able to have something where, yeah, all these are like a type of error. And so we can have a number that says, here's an error. While at the same time, if that manager wants to look at the information the way they want to look at it, right? Which is like, well, we have like redos and we have like partial errors or whatever it is, they can still see the breakdown as they see it, right? So it's like, because we can do this as human beings. Like if we're as a human being and we're looking at the way that they set up, this one manufacturing plant sets up their data, it's no problem for us to understand, oh, these are all types of errors, right? Like it's easy, and if some other
right. Yeah.
manufacturing plant, they have a few different things, that's easy for us as human beings. So it's definitely possible. And that's sort of what's driven us is like, well, this is definitely solvable because human beings go around and do it all the time. And we don't like, have our brains explode, say, it does not compute, or like this one was capitalized and this one wasn't. So now it's all broke. It's like, that's not how human beings work. And so it's definitely possible to do it that way. And that's what we've endeavored to do.
So pretty cool. So the verticals starting in sports, you move to financials. Now you're moving into manufacturing
Oh,
as well. What are the key verticals that you guys have approached or attacked? I
yeah,
guess.
basically, yeah, sports. We do have a medical product, just one right now. We have a couple different financial products, and we've done retail stuff, marketing stuff, like analyzing marketing campaigns. Really, our system can be applied to anything, but from a practical standpoint, we really need something that's pretty complex in terms of what somebody needs to read, right? So I always use the example, if you're talking about, all right, I'm in Indiana, if the Colts are playing the Titans and all you care about is who won, then you don't need our system, right? Because you could just see it was 30
Yeah,
to
I can.
20.
Who won? Yeah.
That's that. If you want to know what happened, well, that's a huge, complicated question because there were thousands of things that happened in the game, and there's literally millions of ways you can contextualize all those, right? And so, if you're trying to say, like, give me 5 paragraphs to know what happened, you need a really sophisticated synthesis, right, of the data. And that's a lot of the times businesses, maybe they have a lot of data, but really they only care about sort of like 3 metrics, and then they're good to go. So they don't need us. So if you have something that's complicated and then also have something that's a pretty big scale, because we are modeling this stuff on our own, because we do have to sort of set up a data ingestion plan, a distribution plan, like these things take time. And so it really only makes sense for us to do it if it's going to be a pretty wide scale. But a lot of times big companies have that, right? So it's not just, hey, we
Oh
want a
yeah.
sales report every quarter, but actually we want everybody on our sales team to be getting a report every week detailing what's happening and how it fits into the larger sales figures and all these different things. If you need something like that, then that's a situation where we can be very helpful.
Okay, so let's talk about the engagement model a little bit. So if I engage with you guys, your team interviews us. It's an engagement, right? How long does it take from the time that I say, "All right, Steve, we want to do this at Intel," to look at all of our manufacturing plants and all that stuff, right? And so, what's that look like? How long does that take to typically? I know it's going to be unique
Yeah.
for every customer, but are we talking a year
Oh, no, no,
engagement,
no.
a
I mean,
week engagement,
yeah,
3 months,
3 to 6 months probably.
3 to 6?
Yeah.
Okay,
From like
that's not too bad.
start to finish. Yeah.
And you guys get right down deep in our data, talk to us, right? It's a collaborative thing, right?
Yeah, but it's pretty rare that anybody has to spend that much time because
Okay,
usually I would say 2 to 3 hours tops, to get us started, and then maybe another few hours as we iterate, but it's not like we have to sit down and talk because it's like usually it's pretty straightforward in terms of what we're looking at. Like we have a sense of like in general, okay, you care about this going up or down or these subcomponents,
right.
and then and so it doesn't usually take that long to sort of figure out the peculiarities, right, of your particular needs and that. So I don't want to give people the impression that they're going to be like having to sort of like train us in whatever system they have.
Gotcha,
It's
because
usually
you
just
have data experts. You guys understand data already.
yeah,
So
and usually it's pretty clear more or less what they're interested in, and so it's more about just understanding the subtleties, right? Even some of the jargon, the language, understanding, just how long they want the report, who they want to target it towards. I mean, things like that. But it's not like a whole, uh, multi-day session or something to get us to know what to do.
also, you mentioned reports, right? Because I mean, that's the ultimate goal, is to understand your data
Hmm.
in a textual and graphical form, because you have, they're both. Um, how often get that information in real time, or are they generated reports? I mean, how is it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, scale is not a problem for us in any way, right? Like whether that's number of reports or timing. For instance, the fantasy product that we do with CBS Sports, that's we're regularly producing more than 1 million articles a week,
Oh,
that
wow.
are going out to folks, and a lot of those are even produced in a short period of time. So we're literally producing hundreds of thousands an hour at points, and we could go faster if we needed to. So
So I could do real time. I could do real time information.
absolutely. I mean, a product that we're doing with the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, which is, I think you saw the demo that we
Oh
had for
yeah, yeah,
that,
yeah.
but that we're bringing that wide to the public. So basically, we're creating a website for the Chicago Mercantile Exchange that covers every single commodity in their system in real time. And so it's going to be a very different way, I think, to get information, because people typically, when you're on a website, it's like you have stories, right, that somebody wrote, and maybe those stories are 3 hours old or 4 hours old. They kind of
Yeah,
have a
yeah, they're
crawl,
stale.
right? And in the financial space, it's like, sometimes those are accurate, sometimes they're not. And I think it's going to be very different, sort of looking at this website, because you're going to have this huge amount of content and videos and charts and everything on every single topic, except it's just pretty much like, now this is all the information right now, and if something changes, the headline's going to change, and whenever you log on, that's what's going to be there. And you can even put in your preferences in terms of like the types of things that you care about, like the commodities or the types of metrics even, and like all of it's going to change for you. So it's like, these are
So it's
your things.
customized for me, what I'm looking for
Yes.
specifically. So that's pretty cool. It's not a static report. And one thing you showed me, I remember, I thought was really cool. I have a story in front of me. It's generated based off of my preferences, and then I can highlight, something in the text. I says, this is really interesting. I can highlight that. It'll show it on the graph that matches it.
Yeah.
And then I can click on it and get another story based off of that small amount of data that I said, yeah, I'm really interested in this part of the story. Click, and details in story format again. That drill down capability to me is brilliant, right? Because I can now traverse my data really in story form, which is
Right. Yeah.
fascinating because the analysis is happening on the fly. Um, to me, this is really about the interface. I know all the cool technology behind it's making it available,
Yeah.
but when we talk about the real win on this, to
Yeah.
me, is that you guys are interfacing with a human instead of a human learning how to interface with a computer.
Hmm.
Very, very the opposite. And I think we're moving in that direction in a lot of other AI, which to me is fascinating.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think that we have had such a greater response to the demo because of that, even though the technology isn't necessarily that much better than it was before when it was just the stories, because now people can really see intuitively, like, oh, this is what's happening. This is the flexibility. This is the power behind it, in ways that just saying, oh, here, read this report that we did on fantasy sports, and then read this report that we did on stocks, and read, it's like people are like, oh, cool. But like when you actually get to like choose your own adventure essentially through your data, it's powerful in a way that wasn't there before.
I love that. Choose your own adventure through your data.
Yeah.
That's the tagline. That's the tagline of the episode. I think it's pretty brilliant, frankly, because we've seen data marts before, and in some respects, this is kind of like a data mart.
Hmm.
Um, where I've set the data up so I can easily traverse it as long as I have a PhD in data science,
Right.
right? As long as I understand the data. And what you've done is you've delivered the data to professionals that don't have to understand the
Mm-hmm.
data, but maybe understand their context, whether
Right.
it's fantasy sports or commodity
Mm-hmm.
exchange, right? To me, that one's brilliant, right? I can look and see. I get my story. I'm really interested in oranges, so I'm going to drill down in. Hey, the orange market's doing. I'm going to drill down in there, and maybe it gets me to some data on forecasting
Mm-hmm.
for the winter this winter, whatever the case may be. It's all right at my fingertips, which I think
Mm-hmm.
is something unique that you guys bring to the table.
Thank you. Yeah, we think it's pretty cool, and we think when people get to actually do it on their own, that there'll be a pretty good response, because this is going to be basically public. You have to have like a CME account, which is free to sign up for. So yeah, and being able to drill down again, I'll just caveat a little bit that, like, because it's a sort of public website that's not supported by an individual processor, you can't necessarily drill down anywhere you want to go, but there's going to be a lot of a fair amount of that, like all the kind of like typical bases that somebody would be interested in are going to be covered and sort of pre-built, so that when they want more information on a topic, it's like, oh, we already wrote that. Here's your webpage,
You've
essentially.
written it
On
once, so yeah.
Yeah, except that it's rewritten every 5-10 minutes, right? So it's like every time, and again with various preferences and all sorts of other things. So it's like, depending on what you're interested in, it's like that article is essentially waiting for you. But then if we had a client that was wanting to have this supported in terms of like the total freedom version, they can get that too, because then we just sort of generate the content on
Generate
demand.
it on the fly. Then, real quick, how do people find out more about it? Where do they get information? About your company and your products.
Yeah, so my company's name is InfoSentience. I don't think we mentioned that, so I'm
No,
obviously
no,
I'm
yeah,
very
yeah.
bad at marketing. But no, InfoSentience. Well, I'm super bad because that's not even a very good name, but whatever, it is what it is. So InfoSentience is our website. My name's Steve Wasick. I'm on LinkedIn, so people can follow me on LinkedIn. I try to do some posts about natural language generation and things like that. But yeah, you can just go on there and request a demo or reach out to me through LinkedIn. But yeah, we still have lots of fun things I think we're going to be doing
Yeah,
in a lot of
it's
different
exciting.
verticals. Yeah, so I think if people, I'd love to, every time I give the demo, I think I told you this, and I asked you, I said, hey, have you ever seen anything like this, right? And everybody said no. Like nobody's like, oh yeah, this is like what so and so is doing, or like, oh, it's
No,
like, no.
it's
Everybody
very
always
unique.
just says no, I haven't seen anything like this. And we built all the technology up ourselves. We're not using anybody else's technology anywhere other than, I mean, we use HTML5, right? But like that's about, like we use HTML, but that's about it. So everything else is
And
our
this
own.
runs this can run on prem and in the cloud. Not a problem.
Yeah,
I can run it anywhere, right?
yeah. And you can run it anywhere, and we deliver anywhere. And the data, again, because we have to kind of model it, right? Like it doesn't matter what structure your data's in. Like we never tell our clients like, oh, hey, like you got to put these things in order and these things. It's just like, just give us access, and then we hit it, and then we put it into our ontology
So you can
essentially.
do structured, unstructured data. It doesn't matter.
Oh, it has to be structured. Yeah, so that's one thing.
Okay, it
So
has to
so
be
it
structured.
has to be
Okay,
structured,
structured data.
but it's
Okay,
like you can have 10 different silos, and again, it's like, oh, this manufacturing plant they do this, and this one they use that. I mean,
okay,
that adds
gotcha.
some complexity to the project, but we deal with that again because we want, like, the reason that it's typically in a different format or in a different structure is because it's actually different, right? Like sometimes, yeah, it's like the field name is the same, or it's like just a field name, but most of the time the reason that like the structure of the data is different here than here is because there's actually something different going on.
See, that's a very different approach than most data scientists use. Most data scientists come in and say, I need to clean and curate all my data. It all needs to be normalized. And what you're saying is embrace the variability, understand why it's
Mm-hmm.
there, and use it, which
Yes.
I think is brilliant. So,
Thank
Steve,
you.
this has been fascinating to learn more about you and your company. Thanks for coming on the show.
Darren, thanks so much for having me. This is a fun talk.
All right, I think that's a take. Thank you for listening to Embracing Digital Transformation today. If you enjoyed our podcast, give it 5 stars on your favorite podcasting site or YouTube channel. You can find out more information about Embracing Digital Transformation at embracingdigital.org. Until next time, go out and do something wonderful.